In the cold North Atlantic, nearly 5 kilometers beneath the surface, lies the watery grave of the German battleship Bismarck. When she burst onto the world stage in May 1941, Bismarck embodied the Third Reich's ambition to dominate the seas, and her brief but ferocious career culminated in one of the most dramatic naval chases in history. After sinking HMS Hood, the pride of the Royal Navy, she was relentlessly hunted by British forces and sent to the ocean floor after a 2-day pursuit. For decades, the precise location of the wreck remained a mystery. Then there was the question of how such a heavily armored giant finally succumbed. Now we have answers. An underwater drone mission to Bismarck's wreck has finally given us the last piece of the puzzle. Let's unveil the whole truth. Discovery of the wreck. In June 1989, marine geologist and oceanographer Robert Duane Ballard led a landmark expedition that finally located the wreck of the German battleship Bismarck, a vessel whose dramatic end had fascinated naval historians for nearly half a century. Ballard, who was then affiliated with the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts, had already gained international recognition for locating the wreck of RMS Titanic in 1985. His objective with Bismarck was to resolve lingering questions about how the pride of the Kriegsmarine met her fate on 27 May 1941 after a running battle with the Royal Navy. Although the British Admiralty had recorded the approximate coordinates of the sinking, some 650 kilometers west of Brest, France, the precise position remained elusive, buried under almost 5 kilometers of Atlantic water. Ballard's mission was not only to find the ship, but also to document her condition with the best imaging technology available at the time. Why? Well, he wanted to settle the debate once and for all. Was she destroyed by British gunfire and torpedoes, or deliberately scuttled by her own crew? The 1989 search relied on technology that represented the cutting edge of deep-sea exploration. The central tool was Argo, a towed camera sled developed by the U.S. Navy and Woods Hole scientists. Argo functioned as a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, before that term became common, carrying high-resolution video cameras, still cameras, and powerful lights capable of illuminating the pitch-black depths. The system was designed to hover roughly 50 meters above the seafloor while being towed behind the research vessel Nor, sending live video and sonar data back to the surface through a fiber optic cable. Ballard had perfected this method during the Titanic expedition, and the Bismarck search applied the same strategy to tow Argo back and forth in a grid pattern over the suspected site until debris appeared on the monitors. Once key targets were identified, the team planned to use the 3-person submersible Alvin for close-up examination and photography. Alvin, owned by Woods Hole, had a pressure-resistant titanium sphere that allowed it to dive safely to depths beyond 4,500 meters. Researchers could thus inspect the wreck directly. After days of systematic sweeps across the designated search box, Argo's cameras finally transmitted unmistakable images of large steel debris scattered on the seabed. On 8th June 1989, the expedition confirmed that it had found the Bismarck, resting at a depth of approximately 4,791 meters. The coordinates placed the wreck roughly 650 kilometers west of Brest, France, near the southern end of the mid-Atlantic ridge. Geological surveys revealed that the wreck lay against the slope of an extinct undersea volcano. The site was eerily quiet and devoid of strong currents. This had helped preserve the wreck for nearly 5 decades. The team noted that the ship had come to rest upright, its bow pointing upslope, as if it had settled gently despite the violent battle and catastrophic flooding that sent it down. The overall structural integrity of the wreck astonished the scientists. At more than 250 meters in length when afloat, the Bismarck was still largely in one piece, her hull sitting upright on the keel with minimal deformation in the heavily armored central citadel. The exception was the stern, which was entirely missing. Subsequent mapping indicated that this section had torn away either during the final plunge or when the ship struck the seafloor, a fate not uncommon for vessels whose sterns house vulnerable structural transitions and heavy machinery spaces. Debris from the stern trailed down the volcanic slope for hundreds of meters. Close visual inspection using Alvin and later high-definition imaging confirmed a pattern of damage consistent with the running battle of May 1941. The superstructure, the command towers, upper decks, and gun mounts showed extensive shell and fire damage, including jagged holes from heavy-caliber British naval shells. Several large apertures punctured the main deck, and the charred remains of the forward turrets bore witness to the bombardment by HMS Rodney and HMS King George V. Yet the armored belt along the sides of the ship, which measured up to 320 millimeters thick, was designed to resist heavy artillery. This appeared largely unbreached. Investigators counted 8 major holes above the original waterline, 1 on the starboard side and 7 on the port side. These punctures, while significant, did not extend below the main armor belt, meaning they would not have caused catastrophic flooding of the inner citadel during the battle itself. Perhaps the most striking finding was the absence of any penetrations through the thick armored plating that protected Bismarck's vital machinery and magazines. Ballard's team scoured the hull from bow to stern with Argo's cameras, expecting to see gaping rents or torpedo-induced breaches. Instead, they found the armor intact. The data gathered in 1989 included thousands of still photographs, hours of video footage, and extensive sonar maps, all of which were cataloged for naval historians and engineers. Measurements of the surrounding debris field showed that smaller pieces, including secondary armaments and structural plating, were scattered over an area roughly 3 by 5 kilometers. The location on the flank of an extinct volcanic seamount also explained the ship's upright posture. The gentle slope allowed the hull to slide rather than slam into the abyssal plain. This helped preserve not only the battleship's form, but also many delicate features such as railing sections and remnants of deck equipment, giving us an unparalleled view of a World War II capital ship. Even as it rests in the middle of the ocean, subsequent expeditions in the years after Ballard's discovery have returned to the site, subsequent underwater drone missions. Beginning in June 2001, a joint expedition carried out by Deep Ocean Expeditions and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution returned to the Bismarck site for further investigation. This dive employed modern ROVs and mini-submersibles to supplement what Ballard's 1989 mission had discovered. The team, including marine experts like William N. Lang from Woods Hole, observed that the upper portions of Bismarck's superstructure and decks had many shell holes visible, consistent with heavy gunfire. However, Lang and others reported that there were not that many holes along the ship's sides, and none below the waterline that breached the main armor belt. One of the outcomes of the 2001 survey was a detailed mapping of the debris field around Bismarck. The wreck's surroundings were systematically scanned, showing other fragments of the ship's structure and items that had separated during sinking, impact, or the descent down the slope of the underwater volcano on which it came to rest. Using ROV-mounted cameras and sonar, the survey captured large gash features in the hull, though many of these were assessed by the team to result from the ship's collision with the seafloor and subsequent sliding down the slope of the underwater volcano on which it came to rest. In 2002, James Cameron led a more cinematic, but also technically advanced, revisit to Bismarck, producing the documentary Expedition Bismarck. Building on previous surveys, the 2002 mission used Russian-built Mir submersibles, Mir 1 and Mir 2, as well as ROV probes to perform both exterior and interior imaging of Bismarck. These dives provided the first significant interior views of the ship: compartments, passageways, rudder structures, the command bridge, and inner hull features. Cameron's team made measurements and observations that refined earlier findings. They noted that although approximately 719 large-caliber shells had been fired at Bismarck by British battleships Rodney and King George V in the final engagement, only 2 instances of full penetration through the 320mm main side belt armor were confirmed in visible portions of the hull. Their imaging also revealed long tears in hull plating at the lower junction of the armor belt, but these are attributed primarily to the ship's impact with the seabed and the stress of sliding down the slope rather than to direct shell or torpedo penetration during combat. Furthermore, Cameron's team reported compression of decks beneath the armored deck by 3 to 4 meters, indicating that the force of sinking and impact had severely warped internal deck levels. But that's not all. There have also been private and documentary explorations besides the 2001 and 2002 missions. Use of improved sonar, higher resolutions in video, more agile ROVs, and AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles, have enabled more precise mapping and better lighting for interior shots. The 2002 Cameron expedition in particular benefited from more agile submersibles and better imaging systems than were available in 1989. These subsequent missions have contributed significantly to naval archaeology by delivering better empirical data. They have allowed researchers to validate or revise earlier claims, such as those regarding armor belt integrity, the nature of structural damage, and the role of scuttling versus battle damage. So, here's what we know from all of this. The thick main side belt armor shows almost no full penetrations. Aside from a couple of verified breaches in visible areas during the Cameron expedition, most damage does not extend through this belt. The superstructure, which includes upper decks, turret tops, and gun mounts, is heavily riddled with shell holes, blazes, and deformation. Interior compartments show evidence of flooding and collapse. The wreck lies on an extinct undersea volcano's slope. When Bismarck struck the seafloor, massive forces caused gashes and displacement in the lower hull plating. The downstream slide of the wreck down the volcano's flank scattered debris and caused distortion in the hull. But now, the million-dollar question. Was Bismarck sunk by heavy artillery fire from pursuing British naval ships, or was it deliberately scuttled? We'll answer this in a short while. Before we do, let's reconstruct the events for context, shall we? How did Bismarck meet her end? Scuttling versus battle damage. The German battleship Bismarck was launched on 14th February 1939 and commissioned on 24th August 1940. She was among the most powerful warships built, displacing about 41,700 metric tons standard, with main armament of 8 15-inch guns, heavy armor, and a design intended to challenge British naval supremacy. Under the command of Captain Ernst Lindemann and Fleet Command by Admiral Günther Lützen, Bismarck set out on Operation Rheinübung in May 1941, along with the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, to attack Allied shipping in the Atlantic. At dawn on 24th May 1941, Bismarck and Prinz Eugen intercepted the British battle cruiser HMS Hood and the newly commissioned battleship HMS Prince of Wales, northwest of Iceland. At approximately 0552 hours, both German ships opened fire at a range of about 25,000 yards. Within minutes, Bismarck's 15-inch shells found their mark. At 0600 hours, a salvo penetrated Hood's after magazines, triggering a catastrophic explosion that broke the British flagship in two and killed 1,415 of her 1,418 crew. Prince of Wales scored several hits on Bismarck, damaging a fuel tank forward and reducing her top speed to around 28 knots. But she was forced to disengage after suffering mechanical failures and shell damage. Following the engagement, Admiral Günther Lützen decided to steer Bismarck toward the French port of Saint-Nazaire for repairs, detaching Prince Eugen to raid independently. British forces scrambled to shadow and intercept the battleship. Aircraft from the carrier HMS Victorious attacked on the night of the 25th of May, scoring a single torpedo hit that caused minor damage. Using evasive maneuvers and radio silence, Bismarck temporarily shook off her pursuers, prompting a frantic search across the Atlantic.
The respite was brief. On 26 May, a Catalina flying boat of RAF Coastal Command sighted the German vessel 690 nautical miles west of Brest, France. That evening, swordfish biplanes launched from the carrier HMS Ark Royal and braved heavy fire and foul weather to strike again. One torpedo jammed Bismarck's rudder at a 12-degree angle, crippling her maneuverability and effectively sealing her fate. Throughout the night, British destroyers harassed the ship with torpedoes and gunfire, preventing repairs. At dawn on 27 May, the battleships HMS Rodney and HMS King George V, joined by heavy cruisers Norfolk and Dorsetshire, closed in about 300 nautical miles west of Brest. Beginning at 0847, they pummeled Bismarck with a relentless barrage. Over 700 large-caliber shells and numerous torpedoes struck home, wrecking her superstructure, silencing her guns, and setting her ablaze. By late morning, she was a drifting hulk. At around 10:40, Dorsetshire fired two final torpedoes. Moments later, Bismarck rolled to port and sank stern first at approximately. Of the more than 2,200 men aboard, only 114 survived to be rescued by British ships and the German U-boat U-74. Now this is where the real mystery begins. Several German survivors claimed that Bismarck was scuttled by her own crew in her final moments to avoid capture. Among them was Gerhard Junak, Bismarck's chief engineering officer, who later said he ordered demolition charges to be set in compartments with 9-minute fuses, though the intercom system failed and a messenger sent to confirm the order did not return. Survivors also testified that valves and watertight doors were opened to accelerate flooding after the ship had been so badly damaged that resistance was impossible. These German accounts have formed part of the argument that while Bismarck had sustained heavy combat damage, some acts of deliberate scuttling were carried out to ensure she sank. When Robert Ballard's expedition discovered the wreck in 1989, he reported seeing very few, if any, penetrations through the main side armor belt below the waterline. The armor that was intended to protect the most vital parts of Bismarck, such as machinery spaces and magazines, appeared largely intact. The damage was concentrated on the superstructure, decks, gun houses, and areas above the main belt.
Based on those observations, Ballard suggested that battle damage alone might not have been sufficient to sink Bismarck rapidly, and that scuttling actions contributed materially to her sinking. He emphasized that the hull did not show signs of implosion. This would have been expected if flooding had been sudden and overwhelming from below the waterline. Relatively intact armor suggests controlled flooding or internal measures that allowed the ship to settle rather than break apart immediately. Other historians and exploration teams contend the British firepower and torpedo damage were sufficient to doom Bismarck, even without scuttling. Key among these is David Marantz. His 2001 Anglo-American expedition found gashes in the ship's hull that they interpret as initiated by torpedo hits, especially in the starboard amidships region. These holes, though partly enlarged by the slide down the slope after the wreck settled, remain evidence of combat damage. It is argued that the torpedo from the Swordfish planes that struck her stern, disabling the rudders, was a decisive event. Loss of steering rendered Bismarck unable to escape or maneuver, making subsequent close-range fire from Rodney, King George V, and others far more lethal. Estimates suggest that over 2,800 shells were fired by British ships, with more than 400 hits scored. These shell hits devastated the superstructure, blew away gun turrets, ignited fires, knocked out main battery turrets, and compromised boiler rooms. Historians like Garski and Doolin hold that this combination of damage would have led to uncontrolled flooding, loss of buoyancy, and eventual sinking even if scuttling charges had not been set. So, what really happened? Well, Bismarck's final fate was not caused exclusively by either battle damage or scuttling, but by both working together. The ship was first crippled by British attacks, the torpedo attacks from Swordfish that jammed the rudders, then the heavy shell fire on 27 May from King George V and Rodney, and perhaps 9 damage hits that compromised her ability to fight, caused fires, loss of armament, boiler failures, and flooding. At that point, the ship was severely wounded, dead in the water in many respects. Then, as German survivors attest, scuttling charges and the opening of internal valves and doors occurred at about 9:30 hours to accelerate flooding and prevent Bismarck from being captured by the British. The order, often attributed to Executive Officer Hans Uhls after Captain Lindemann and Admiral Lütjens were incapacitated, involved opening watertight doors and possibly engine room sabotage via valves. Many agree that this action hastened the sinking by minutes rather than hours. Bismarck was already beyond saving in functional terms. Researchers such as Ballard estimated that without scuttling, Bismarck might have floated for some hours more, perhaps even a full day, but was unlikely to survive until rescue or boarding. Others suggest that the effect of scuttling was to speed up the inevitable, rather than change the course of what was already decided by the damage. The ship's design, with a heavy armor belt, helped delay catastrophic flooding, but once control was lost and with internal damage mounting, the only question was how quickly she would sink. Survivor testimony, analysis of damage in the wreck, and expert historiography combined to show that scuttling did not come out of nowhere. It came when battle damage had made the ship untenable and served to ensure she sank rather than be captured. The current consensus among historians attributes the sinking to both battle damage and scuttling. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.